I'm thrilled to have Alex Czarnecki, co-founder and CEO of Cottage, with us today. Alex's story is noteworthy. He joined Uber when it was a team of 500 and helped scale the organization to 20,000. During his career, he has spent time in Vietnam, the Nordics, and other parts of Europe. We discuss how all of that has impacted him today as the founder and CEO of Cottage, which is changing the residential real estate industry one accessory dwelling unit at a time. The conversation is packed with insights for founders and builders. So let's jump in. Alex, thanks for coming on the Unstacked Startups podcast. Really appreciate having you here today.
Thanks for having me, Ilan.
Of course. I was really looking forward to this conversation in terms of what you're building at Cottage and learning more about your background. And maybe that's a good place to start is, I know you spent a bulk of time at Uber. You've spent some time at Sousa Ventures as an entrepreneur in residence, and now are the co-founder or the founder and CEO of Cottage. How did all this come to be? Maybe fill the audience in a little more on yourself.
Sure. So my background, I'm calling you from San Francisco. I grew up here in Palo Alto in the heart of technology. Dad was a research scientist and hardware engineer. Spent the first few years of my career actually out in Asia, not working in tech, so working as a consultant and doing expansion strategy for Pizza Hut. Applied to join Uber in Asia to go launch the business in a number of markets out there. They told me that I didn't speak Mandarin, so I should go to Europe. So spent a few years there in Europe, first working on the ride sharing business, then on the Uber Eats business, kind of from its earliest days.
Maybe a quick follow-up as you reflect on, your time at Uber, and you were there for, a pretty significant period of scale at Uber. Are there things that you recall from that time, from being in the trenches, from launching different markets that you take away with you today?
Sure. Yeah, I would say very much kind of pre-Cottage is the formative experience of my career. I joined the company at this really interesting inflection point of growth. I was there from essentially 500 employees to 20,000 over the course of 5 years. And the company quadrupled in size my first year. My first role there was a launcher. So we were essentially I was like a 26-year-old sent to a country where I didn't speak the language with $1 million Amex, and they say, go build a business here. So that would involve figuring out what exact iteration of the product to launch, how to localize it, how to price it, building the initial supply and demand in the marketplace, and then hiring the core team, so the local in-market team, before getting sent off to the next market. So I did that in Ireland, Spain, Portugal, Denmark, Sweden, France, and the UK.
Fascinating. So you said did you say 500 or 5,000 to 20,000?
500 to 20,000.
500 to 20,000. Holy geez. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say some of the learnings I took away from it. So first of all, just being able to experience hypergrowth like that is a rare opportunity, which was fantastic, and feel very fortunate to have been able to join at that time and kind of see it grow in that way. Certainly, there are areas of culture and talent that I took away from that I bring over to Cottage and thinking about how to build a team and all of that. I'd say one of the really, from like a product perspective, one of the things that's really interesting about Uber is that it's this business that interacts with both the digital and physical world. So using software to change the physical world around us, which also comes over to Cottage in its own iteration. Granted, there are a lot of the wrong lessons we learned at Uber too, right? And or lessons from a different era, right? I should say. So
Sure.
The ZERP era, growth at all costs, throw some marketing dollars into Facebook and Google behind it. I think there are certain things in 2022, 2023 we've all had to relearn, and I would say that the founder friends that I carry over from Uber as well have gone through the same learning experience.
For the audience, what is Cottage? What are you working on today?
Yep. Cottage is a marketplace platform for residential construction. We started with ADUs, and we've kind of become the number one ADU company across really the United States at this point. There are kind of two core components to this business. One is connecting all of the nodes of the marketplace. So homeowner who wants to build something with architectural designers, consultants and engineers, general contractors that need to collaborate on the project. And then the second piece is building a modern software platform that enables everyone to collaborate, engage in a more modern and more successful way to drive better outcomes for construction projects, which historically have been a big pain for both sides.
Gotcha. So if I'm a homeowner and I have a backyard garage that I'm thinking of converting into a second apartment, there's permitting involved. There's how do you get it set up? There's the construction, the design of it, and that's where you guys come in and make that whole process more efficient, more friendly.
Exactly. So you'd come to us, we would connect you with all of the pros, all the specialists that you need to collaborate with in order to project. So an architectural designer to design exactly what you're thinking, kind of customize it to your garage, permit expediters to take it through the city, consultants and engineers to do surveys or structural engineering or geotechnical, depending on what you need. And then ultimately getting you multiple bids from general contractors so you can select the GC that you want to work with on the project. We do that all through modern platform, digital payments, digital communications.
Gotcha. So that's where you mentioning, hey, your experience at Uber, which was digital, but also very much in the real world in terms of, the product offering. There are similarities in terms of what you're doing here at Cottage. Is there anything that you specifically think of that, from your time at Uber that you think has helped you today as you've embarked on this Cottage journey?
Yeah, there's a lot. I'd say one of the things, especially launching Uber in new markets, pretty much everywhere we would go, you would tell people, hey, there's this app. You tap a button, get a driver to come take you on to your destination. And people would be like, oh, this is Portugal. We don't need that. It won't work here. And then actually kind of pushing through and making sure that it actually does work there. That is, as a founder, how many times you get told no, how many times you get told your idea is not going to work, and having to kind of force yourself to move the chains forward is something that I thankfully got a little bit of practice on beforehand.
Yeah, and you probably saw, throughout the years, you heard that story play out all the time with Uber's trajectory and Uber's growth and launching in different markets and different regulatory challenges and legal challenges and everything else that went through it. I mean, different cultures, etc. And it sounds to me like, in a way, as someone who is, launching essentially these markets in different countries and different regions, you have to be an entrepreneur multiple different times and essentially start startups within Uber, every handful of months to get things going. Is that a fair analogy?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the business was launched out of a hotel room or an Airbnb most of the time before we had hired anyone on the team. And started with a one room. Generally speaking, this is the pre-work WeWork area. So this is our Regis offices, or a hotel conference room to have 2 or 3 people operationalizing this business. That's how every one of these markets became, and some of them became multi-billion-dollar revenue annual markets.
Gotcha.
The same side, I also, I got to see Uber Eats quite early, which was allowed us to see what a 3-sided marketplace looks like. You have eaters, couriers, and restaurants. And I also give some credit to that, where there's a small business side and there's a consumer side, or I guess there's a couple. There's like an earner side, a small business side, and a consumer side, which is somewhat similar to how we operate today with Cottage.
So, okay. So Alex, you're a few years into Cottage. How did you go from, okay, here's a problem, I think it's a real problem, here, is a potential solution to this problem, to putting a team together here, an initial team, a founding team. What did that look like?
Yeah, on the product and general kind of business structuring side, I basically had the benefit of following the own personal pain points that I had felt in trying to help my parents with one of these projects. So figuring out, navigating what's possible with the city, finding the right architects, consultants, and contractors, and working with them successfully. It's broken every step of the way. It's very much caught in a pre-technology era, and so I was able to draw upon those from the homeowner side. Now, I think the evolution of the business, I think we found that in order to solve these pain points, you really need to spend more time with the pros that are providing these services. So architects, engineers, contractors. And the more that we've spent time with them to underside their side of the coin with these pain points, the better we're able to align incentives and get better outcomes across the board. As far as building out the core team in the initial process, so I started noodling on this at SUSE. I had a couple thought partners at the fund, Chad Byers, who ended up leading our seed round, and then Misha, who's another partner there. So those were my thought partners in those early days. I did go out to my network and try to find a co-founder. And what I found at the time was I couldn't kind of match up uh, excitement about the idea and the mission, the right skill set. So a lot of the folks that I work with had relatively overlapping skill set, and then the timing. So you have people that would be perfect, but in other aspects of life, whether it's starting families, whether it's financially, they weren't ready to kind of take the plunge at the time. So I ended up going out as a sole founder, which I probably wouldn't do again. If I'm being totally honest, it's hard not to have someone to share that with.
You mentioned that you were going out, you're, potentially looking to bring on a co-founder, and you said something that resonated there, that in that process were looking for someone or a couple people who had complementary or different skill sets or maybe even different personalities. I'm assuming that in the next handful of hires that some of those people have been brought in that have complemented what you don't do as well to help drive this thing forward. Is that fair to say?
Totally. Yeah. The first few hires at the company, I'd say, first of all, they all came from a network, right? It's quite difficult. We can talk about strategies about how to convince someone to join an early stage startup, but it is quite difficult to bring on the first hires. Even in this case where I had raised $3.5 million, I was be able to pay some sort of salary. But convincing the first people to join the team is a challenge. It certainly gets easier and easier as you go along. In terms of building out the founding team composition, for sure, one of the big things that I was looking to supplement was I had no subject matter expertise. I had kind of done a little bit from the homeowner side of helping my parents with this ADU project, but I wasn't an architect, wasn't a contractor, had no experience really in that space. So getting to build out a team of folks who do have a little bit of education with that background or had spent some time in this space was really helpful at me rounding out my own kind of blind spots.
Alex, maybe can you tell me a little bit about your core values at Cottage? Because I recall reading about them and feeling like they resonate and feeling like they, are powerful. But I'd love for you to explain in your own words, what are those values? What do they mean to you?
Yep. So we have four values at Cottage. The first one is build like you own the place. You have to forgive, there are some construction puns in the values, but build like you own the place is around essentially a pride in your craft and the work that you do, knowing that the stakes are quite high for our customers, our users, right? These are homeowners who are taking on the second biggest investment of their lifetime, hundreds of thousands of dollars. These are pros that are small businesses that will survive or fail based on some of the work that we do. So really caring about doing your work with pride in your craft is what building like you own the place looks like. The second one is transparency. So this industry in particular has always been incredibly opaque. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And so we want to be more transparent, obviously, with our team internally, but also with our customers and just provide a level of transparency that hasn't been seen in this industry before.
Alex, as you think about Cottage today, early 2024, what are some of the things that you're focusing on moving forward? Where are you trying to get Cottage to over the next few years?
Sure. Yeah, maybe just to zoom out on the starting point, I would look at residential construction and real estate as the last mega pillar of the economy that has yet to fully adopt technology. And so I think we're very early on in that journey if you look at both Cottage and where the industry is. For us in 2024, one of our core aspirations is to expand outside of the ADU space. So be able to power projects for pros of all different kinds, kitchen renovations, bathroom renovations, custom home remodels, ground up builds. These are the work that our pros are doing today outside of Cottage, and we want to be their system of record for their entire business. So that's a core thing. And we believe that if we're able to do that, we're able to help a lot more pros. We're able to expand to a lot more geographies and help a lot more homeowners.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's almost an organic, element. You are enabling these people to, at least in the current iteration of Cottage, make the ADU experience more seamless and more efficient and everything else. But these are people who are building from the ground up that are doing full renovations, and that's something that I think makes total sense. When you made a good point there, you think of you know construction, real estate, residential real estate. It I think on the fringes of it, technology has made things more efficient, but it hasn't been completely turned on its head, I think, through innovation and technology yet. You know, um, where do you see this going? What do you want to see in this industry in a closer to end state?
Yeah. So I think the approach that many venture-backed companies, particularly in the ADU space, have taken is um, trying to apply the lens of car manufacturing to the building of homes. So you see a lot of pitches that are, Tesla did this for cars. We're going to do this for prefabricated homes. And generally speaking, that means building offsite hundreds of miles away in a factory. Our approach is a little bit different. And I think because of that, it will be more applicable outside of ADUs as well. We are really about kind of powering up the small businesses that do operate locally. And what I witness in the folks that we've worked with so far in this business is you have these pros who are really passionate and really excellent at their craft. You really rarely hear that, the building is of low quality when it's finished. You hear about the pain of getting there, right? And in our opinion, a lot of this is because these pros are pulled between doing a great job with their craft and the realities of running a small business. So getting out there in front of customers, closing contracts, managing payments, managing supply chain. So we believe that there is a track record of other industries being able to apply software to that problem that gives these pros more time to focus on their craft. Now, if you span forward and you think about the future with some of the innovation around AI, there are a lot of these, components to the service that can be automated in a way that haven't been able to be successfully done so far. So I'm also quite excited about where that technology can add value for the pros that we work for.
Awesome, Alex. So I'd like to shift a little bit here. You grew up in the Bay Area. You mentioned that your dad was a hardware engineer, I believe is what you mentioned, worked in tech. A lot of your friends growing up, maybe their parents worked in tech, and um, and along your journey, you spent over a decade outside of the Bay Area, traveling in Southeast Asia, across Europe, from your time at Uber. You know, I traveled for a handful of months, so not as long as you did. And you really put roots down and were working in various, countries and everything else. But I found that I learned a lot from my time traveling. I'm wondering, what are there particular things that come to mind from your experience working overseas that help you today, or that give you a different perspective, or how do you reflect on that period?
Sure. Certainly everywhere that I've worked, there's quite, the cultural differences in when you work in different countries are quite significant. And it really does, I think, change the way that you think about leadership and management. To give some examples, Vietnam, super hierarchical, right? So you do everything up the chain through your boss's boss, that sort of thing. Versus a Sweden where I approach this without knowing this, but it is a consensus-based culture. And so the job of the leader is to go around and essentially bring everyone along to a consensus, versus coming top down and making a decision. Those are diametrically opposed. And I think with all of these, you need to figure out what is the style that's going to work for you and stick with it. And to the extent you can, adapt to the culture that you're operating within. Another example is funny. My first week in the Paris office at Uber, my boss, who's French, took me aside and said, "Alex, there's something you need to know about the French. We all want to overthrow our boss. We have a revolutionary mentality. It's part of our history, and we all want to overthrow our boss. So just be cognizant of that, when you approach your management and your team." So, yeah, I'd say my approach is I try to pick up a little bit of each of these cultures, and then just kind of find the management style that's worked for me.
think it's, I think it's, you know, maybe I'm inferring a little bit from what you're saying, but I can imagine that it's made you more well-rounded. It's allowed you to pick up patterns that maybe you're subconsciously doing as it relates to how you work with people, how you work with customers, how you work with people from different backgrounds, from different experiences. Yeah, I mean, I spent some time in Vietnam. Um, uh, a couple buddies, we rented motorcycles and we drove the coast, but which was one of the coolest experiences of my entire life. But such a different culture, a different place compared to the Nordics, where it has, like you said, as it pertains to like business or leadership, or as, the way this, society works is much more consensus driven. And not to say that one is necessarily better than the other, but they both have their pros and cons. And being able to have had those experiences probably been helpful to you.
The other thing that I would be able to say I took away from working in many different countries where it's not home most of the time, I don't speak the language, is just the ingenuity of being able to solve problems, get around, communicate with people. I think that is something that, if you do it long enough, it very much is what the early days of a startup look like as well. So you just need to figure it out. You need to be able to find office space. You need to be able to hire the initial folks on the team. You need to be able to build an early product. And being comfortable in the ambiguous and the uncomfortable is something that certainly I've benefited from.
That's great. If you think about entrepreneurs out there, possibly younger entrepreneurs, people who are looking to break into uh, working at a startup, general question, what advice might you have for them?
So for someone that's looking to join an early stage startup, I would evaluate those opportunities on three dimensions. The first is the stage. So you have from a couple people working in an apartment to obviously large public company, but the experience of building a first product and noodling on a first idea and taking out the trash, every week is a very different experience from we have some funding, we have a product, and we're working on making it better and finding product market fit. Very different from we have product market fit and we're scaling this rapidly. Those are three very different experiences, and you need to kind of choose the one that is best for you. The second dimension is the sector. So whether it is the industry is healthcare or fintech or B2B SaaS of some sort, generally speaking, people have a gravitation towards certain industries and more of an interest or background, and that can be a helpful guiding factor. And then the third is the role or kind of the function. And I definitely am a believer that if you have the opportunity to join a rocket ship, you don't ask, what seat am I in? But you do want to be thinking about if you're not just a software engineer where, you're powerful in any of these contexts. If you're more of a generalist like myself, you want to pick the opportunities that align your skill set and the work you want to be doing with the things that drive business success. So if you are a salesperson, you want to be at a sales-driven organization. If you are an ops person, you want to work at a marketplace where there are more moving pieces, more problems to solve that you can lead on. So that's generally speaking how I would evaluate those three opportunities for early stage startups. But I think everyone could learn a lot from taking a little bit more risk and going a little bit earlier stage.
Fair. I think it's a good depiction of, hey, there are so many different functions, industries, stages of startups, and each is a little bit different, and what that can and can't provide to someone based on their skill set and their desires. And I think it's important for someone to kind of reflect on, where do they think they might line up given those few things that you mentioned. The other thing that, I always try to encourage people as they think about, which startup, once they've maybe answered or tried to answer some of those topics and questions that you brought up, now they kind of come down to, okay, what specific organization, what specific company, or if I go even deeper, what specific team do I want to join? Which people do I want to go to battle with? Do I want to work in the trenches day in, day out, every single day? And I think, it goes back to kind of some of your core values, like optimistic leadership. You want people who have a positive lens. You want people who take ownership over what they're trying to build. You want people who are, or if I was working at a company, I want people who are high character, who are good people. You want to work with them. So I think it's important that people consider those different factors as well, because these people that you go to battle with, you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. So
Totally, yeah. I think the people is that fourth dimension after you get through those three and start talking to folks. But to the point, and maybe this goes back to an earlier point around what we look for, I will say that I ask the same interview question to every single person that I interview, and that is, what are two things you want to get better at? And so this is very much a measure of your self-reflection and how self-aware you are, but also your honesty and your transparency. Are you willing to bring forward some things that you're working on? And I asked for two because many people have prepared one kind of BS thing that they're trying to get better at. They're a perfectionist or time management or something like that. But very few people can come up with two BS answers on the spot. So I find that to be a really helpful one of figuring out the right type of people who will be transparent and self-reflective and work on themselves and try to get better.